Hello and welcome to the Cancer Education Series brought to you by MercyOne and Above and Beyond Cancer. My name is Chris Goodale and I'm the Executive Director of Above and Beyond Cancer. And it is my pleasure to introduce Dick Deming, who's our founder, and he'll introduce our program tonight. Dr. Deming?
Chris, thanks a lot. Thanks everybody for joining us. We got a really informative and I think entertaining discussion this evening. So our speaker is going to be Lucas Nelson, and Lucas and I met several years ago. Lucas is the general manager for MedPharm, and MedPharm is one of the companies that has been authorized by the state of Iowa to produce medical marijuana, CBD and THC, and he'll explain that. And the state of Iowa has a program by which we as doctors can authorize cancer patients and other diseases as well, patients to receive medical grade marijuana products. And it's really something that I'm coming to learn more about. There's a role for medical cannabis, both CBD and THC, in helping cancer survivors with pain management, with insomnia, with appetite, with stress reduction, and a number of other conditions. And over the course of the last few years, as I've worked with Lucas and MedPharm, I've learned more about the value of the product and the role that it has played in helping many of my patients both manage symptoms of cancer, but also help to manage side effects of cancer treatment. Lucas grew up in Indiana. He got his undergrad degree at James Madison University in Virginia and his law degree at Indiana University. And as I said, he's the general manager of MedPharm here in Des Moines. Lucas, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Deming. Thanks, Chris, as well. And appreciate all of you logging on. I am going to share my presentation here so you can see it. I'll get that up. Nope, I might have to ask Chris to allow me to share. Host has disabled screen sharing. There we go.
Sorry about that.
Hey, that's okay. All right, so should be able to see it now, and we will jump in. So again, thanks everyone for logging on, and I will be happy to answer any questions at the end as we work through some of the interesting parts of the program here in Iowa and teach you a little bit more about our medical cannabis program. So I'll start by just introducing a little bit about the MedPharm team. We are a local company located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, and staffed and owned entirely by Iowans. So what is it that we actually do? With our licenses in Iowa, we are really responsible for every bit of the process here. At our facility on the southeast side of Des Moines, we are responsible for growing all of our own plants. And then we take those plants and extract them for the oil that we make our final products from. We'll talk about all that in a moment. We're also responsible for all of the quality control internally, and then our products are also tested externally by the State Hygienic Lab up at the University of Iowa. As that process is happening, we formulate all of our products there in our laboratories, and then we're responsible for packaging them and delivering them across the state to the various dispensaries. MedPharm also does own a dispensing license, and with that license, we're actually responsible for selling the medicine there to patients, working with them on a plan for what's going to work, what doses to take, and again, we'll talk about all that as well. And of course, a large part, we feel our role in the state is bringing education and awareness about the program, and so we're happy to be able to do that this evening. So I thought I'd start by sharing just a couple of photos from our facility, give everyone just a bit of an idea of what it looks like there. You can see on the left one of our small cuttings, and we use a process in our facility that really allows us to standardize all of the plants that we're growing. And that's important because we want to make sure that they're producing all the same molecules over and over and over again, so that we can make sure we have the same formulations ready to go at all times. You can see there on the right, that's one of our vegetative grow rooms. In that room where we can control temperature, light, humidity, carbon dioxide levels, really all of those environmental factors. We'll grow our plants for several weeks. They'll go from the small little plants you see on the left to the bigger and bushier ones you see on the right. And that process really is there to put biomass onto those plants. So we want them nice and bushy like you see on the right, so that they'll be able to produce flowers. Give you an idea of what the flower room looks like. You can see one of our flower rooms there on the right. You can see a flower of one of our cannabis plants up close on the left. You can see right there on kind of those brownish looking parts and the parts that aren't the leaves there, those are the buds or the flowers. And that's really where all of the cannabinoids, the CBD, THC, and those other molecules are stored. So it's really important that we're able to produce as many and as dense flowers as possible throughout our entire flowering room. This entire process takes usually anywhere from 15 to 20 weeks, depending on the particular plant that we're growing. So you can see here, this is one of our THC flowering plants in this room. So from there, we'll dry our plants and we hang dry them all. You can see there a photo on the left. They are cut at the base of the plant when it's time to harvest, and then will be hung to dry for up to about a week or so. On the right, you can see where some of our flowers have been trimmed away from the rest of the stalk and the stem and the things that we don't really need. And it's there that we'll actually grind up that material, put it into our extractors, and start our extraction process. So on the left here, you can see an image of some of our not quite yet refined oil. As we put our plants and those flowers into the extractors, they'll come out with everything that's in the plant. So of course, CBD and THC, those molecules that we want, but also some of the gums and fats and waxes that exist in the plant as well. And there we'll want to make sure that we're cleaning those up and purifying them so that we're able to end up with just that THC oil, just that CBD oil that we can use to actually formulate all of our products. So you can see a shot of one of our chemists. They're formulating. She's actually formulating some of our capsules. All of our formulation is done on site by hand by our laboratory team. Thought we'd also show just a quick view of our dispensary too. We'll talk about that process a little bit later in the presentation, but again, just to kind of orient your mind around what our dispensaries look like. You can see a view of, this is actually our Sioux City, but mimicked pretty closely in Windsor Heights. Again, hopefully kind of a warm, inviting atmosphere for patients to come in. And again, we'll talk about that process in just a little bit. So we usually do get this question, always think it's worthwhile to answer, but all sorts of security features that you'll notice in both the manufacturing facility and the dispensary. We do limit access in the manufacturing facility. Whether it's the dispensary or the manufacturing, you'll see cameras all throughout the building, and everything in Iowa is also tracked by the state of Iowa. The Department of Public Health administers this program, and so they have a full electronic system that, whether it's those really small plants we were talking about at the beginning of the process or a final product or anything in between, that they actually are responsible for tracking to just make sure that they know where everything is in time and know that we can have eyes kind of on where those plants and the oil and those products are. This is very, very common. Most states have some form of a seed to sale tracking system, and Iowa is no different. So we'll talk a little bit about the Iowa program first. Just give you an overview of what our program looks like. Back in 2018, it officially launched, and the law that started this program allows for up to 2 manufacturers and up to 5 dispensaries. We're obviously one of those manufacturers. Unfortunately, the second manufacturer in the state did shut down in June of this year. So currently the Department of Public Health is working on licensing another manufacturer. I do expect that sometime in 21 that process will be completed, and we will have both of our manufacturers in operation and offering products throughout the state. Again, because it's the statute, there's only those two allowed unless that law changes. Then we also have up to 5 dispensaries that can be licensed across the state. I mentioned ours, our location in in Sioux City that I showed some photos of. We've also got a location in Des Moines, in Windsor Heights. And for those of you that are in Des Moines and familiar with it, that's right over by the Sam's Club and the Walmart on University and 73rd. Both of our dispensaries, as well as the other dispensary in Waterloo, are open to the public. That one in Waterloo is owned by a separate company, although they do carry the MedPharm Iowa products. But right now, those are the only 3 locations in the state. Back in March, the other 2 operators did shut down their dispensary locations, so we are down a couple. Again, the department is working, and hopefully in 21 we'll see some of those licensed as well. But like I mentioned with the manufacturers, until we have a change in the law, it will only be those 5 locations. And so, of course, that does present a lot of problems for our folks who live in rural communities or just don't live in Des Moines or Sioux City or Waterloo right now, and it does require some travel. Hopefully that's another thing that we'll be able to work on with our lawmakers and potentially have some more access by the time all is said and done the next legislative session. So how do you actually get a medical card and get into this program? In order to be a patient, you do have to meet a certain couple of requirements. You do have to have 1 or more of the approved conditions. We'll talk about those in a moment. A patient in Iowa can be of any age, but you do have to be a permanent resident of the state. And there is a fee associated with a card. It's either $100 or $25 if you qualify for reduced fee. If you're on Medicaid or receiving supplemental Social Security benefits, those are some of the ways in which you can qualify for that $25 reduced card fee. And that is good for 1 year, that card. So it starts from the time that it's printed and sent to you. And 365 days after that, it does have to be renewed. That fee goes to the Department of Public Health, and it's really there to administer the program. We also have a primary caregiver aspect of this program. And what a primary caregiver is someone who can buy or administer products on a patient's behalf. So again, a couple of requirements. You do have to be a resident of Iowa or any of our bordering states. You do have an age requirement here. You do have to be over 18. And it may be, as I've got listed here, a parent, a guardian, but could be really anyone. We most often see a parent, maybe for a minor child, or a caregiver for potentially someone who maybe isn't as mobile. But those are the types of situations that we see most of our caregivers falling into. There is, again, another $25 fee for the caregiver license as well. But with that license in hand, a caregiver is able to go to a dispensary, purchase product, be in possession of it, and then help administer that product to a patient. So I mentioned that you do have to have 1 or more of those approved conditions. I've got them all listed right here. I'll just highlight these couple at the top. Chronic pain is where we do see the most, the largest majority of our patients. Obviously, chronic pain can be brought on from all sorts of different situations. We see everything from really some people qualified from some of the other conditions that you see listed here. We see fibromyalgia. We see people who have just simply had sort of the aches and pains of life. Others who may have suffered some sort of workplace accident or something like that. It really does run the gamut. And again, if it's a situation that's contributing to causing you chronic pain, then you would qualify. PTSD is a newer condition. Of course, seizure conditions, that's one of the conditions that really got this whole program started. And then cancer is one that we treat quite often as well. So the second most populous condition there in the state for the registered patients is cancer right now. But you can see the the list of a variety of other, pretty serious conditions that people may be suffering from that do qualify for becoming a patient. So if you're a patient or if you qualify as a patient and you have one of those conditions, how do you actually go about getting your card? The first step is to go to your provider and have your conditions certified. There's a form that you can print off. You can access it through our website, through the Department of Public Health. Some providers also have some around their offices every once in a while. We'll hear that. But that form is pretty easy to understand. It really requires the provider to fill out some identifying information and then identify the one or more condition that you may have. And really that's sort of a double check for the state to say, okay, the person here that is trying to apply has been checked out by the doctor or by another healthcare provider, and they've said, yes, this person does have one or more of those conditions. With that form in hand, you can apply then, and you apply either online or you can still mail in a paper version as well. What it'll ask for in that application is really just, again, some identifying information now from yourself, obviously giving that proof that you are an Iowan. The department does receive all that information, but they're not looking at, say, the merits or anything like that. They're really leaving that up to the provider there who certified you. So as long as everything's filled out correctly and the fees are paid, then you can become a patient. And what happens after that is that the department actually will mail a card. They'll email a version of it and then mail a physical card to your mailing address. But as soon as you get that email, you're eligible to come in and buy in a dispensary. And then, of course, once you get that card, that's what you'll be presenting. But it's really gotten streamlined. It's really a lot more efficient than it was when this program first started, and really is a lot simpler to navigate than it used to be. So that's certainly a good step and a step in the right direction. And of course, that can all be accessed from our website, from the Department of Public Health website. Even if you just type in medical cannabis right into Google, you'll be able to find it. So I did mention that it's a certification. It isn't a prescription. We get all sorts of questions about that. This is just really a way for us to make sure, and the state to make sure, that we're not running afoul of federal law. This is what you'll see in most states across the country, is that this is a certification process as opposed to a prescription. And I did include a list of providers who are eligible to certify. Iowa licensed MDs and DOs have always been eligible to, but just recently, nurse practitioners and physician's assistants, podiatrists, all those folks can also certify conditions. So depending on who you may receive your care from, you might find that any of those folks would be able to actually certify for you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be your provider for which you are being treated. So if you are suffering from cancer, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your oncologist, it can be another one of your providers who may know and be familiar with the fact that you do indeed have cancer, or we're at ALS or MS or any of those other things. It doesn't necessarily have to be that person that you may be seeking treatment from for that particular condition. Always think it's interesting to highlight some of the new things that happened in July when a new law went into effect that did really significantly alter some of the aspects of our program. Nurse practitioners and PAs and podiatrists, like I mentioned, those are all eligible to certify. And I think I pointed it out, but PTSD is a relatively new condition that has been added. Chronic pain is our pain condition that I noted. It actually had a bit of a definition update and change. And I think it really works a lot more straightforward. It's a lot easier to understand what chronic pain is versus this old untreatable pain that we used to have. I mentioned that the department sends your card to you now. That's because the change in law has actually eliminated the need for the Department of Transportation in the process. So for those of you who know anyone or who may have experienced a program at any point in its early stages, you used to have to go to the DOT, and I'm sure you are like most others in Iowa that maybe don't enjoy that as much as you otherwise could. So we've got that out of the way. That's not a step that has to happen anymore. No one has to go to the DOT and have a card printed there. It just simply arrives in your mailbox, a couple days after you complete that application process. We do have another new aspect of our law that does require a pharmacy tech or a pharmacist to be employed by each dispensary, and that's something that we have in each of our dispensaries as well. Perhaps the most important change that did happen is that previously in our state, we had a 3% cap on THC, and that was really at the manufacturing level. So it's significantly limited types of products that any manufacturer can make. And the law has changed now to remove that 3% THC manufacturing cap, and it replaced it with a purchase limit. And that's much more common to what we see in a lot of other medical states, or even some recreational states, of course, too. But what that says is, we don't care what the products are as a state. What we're going to look at is how much THC someone is buying. And so the law right now allows for up to 4.5 grams of THC over any 90-day period. And so that's kind of a rolling process. So, were you to buy a gram today, for instance, in 90 days, that gram's going to come off your limit. A little bit less than we see in some other states as far as that gram cap goes. However, the state did put a waiver process in place for increasing that purchase cap. What that allows, right here, you can see just a screen clip of some of that form, but it allows a patient to actually work with their provider to have that cap increased. And so we've seen a number of these, especially from pain, terminally ill patients, some of our cancer patients as well, because what we know is that 4.5 grams, that really what that divides out to is about 50 milligrams a day. That's more than enough for some patients, but it's certainly not sufficient for all patients. And so you can go submit this form again to the Department of Public Health, and as long as it's been signed by your provider, they'll set a new cap. And it doesn't mean that you would buy up to that cap or have to or anything like that, but it does allow a patient who has one of those waivers in force to buy beyond that 4.5 limit. So we see caps, usually in the 15 to 25 gram range, but it really does just depend on who the patient is and what the condition they might be dealing with, and then what that treatment has been like. So that can happen really basically right after you enter the program, right away as you are entering for terminally ill patients, but then for all others after you've participated in the program. So just to give you a couple stats on what Iowa's program looks like right now, we do have a little over 4,500 active cardholders, and that's of October, where we have our latest numbers. About 16% of our patients do have caregivers, so I mentioned that a little bit earlier, and we do have a decent number of folks who have taken advantage of that. And about 41% of the patients in our program do qualify for that reduced card fee. So obviously, we're a little bit smaller than many other medical programs out there, but that being said, we've certainly ticked up over the course of the couple of years that the program has been in place, and I do expect that will continue to grow as we develop more and more access for patients across the state. We do have over 1,100 providers who have participated in the program. When I say participate, I mean that they've signed at least one application. The Department of Public Health has put in a process whereby you can actually call the Department of Public Health if you're having trouble finding someone. We get this question a lot. Hey, I'm interested in participating. I want to talk to someone about it, but I'm having trouble locating a doctor, or my nurse practitioner won't sign for me. You can call the Department of Public Health. They maintain a list of doctors or other providers who have opted in to making their name be shared with patients who may be experiencing that trouble. So you call, you'll identify the region of the state you live in, and then the Department of Public Health will actually provide you a list of some doctors or other providers who are eligible to certify, who may be, who'd be willing to talk with you about potentially getting enrolled in the program. So I found that as we've shared that information with patients, they've had good success in finding someone that way. Obviously, there's other portals to sort of locate that information. Of course, Facebook groups and other groups that, you may be a part of that are there for people together that are dealing with some of these conditions. Those often can be really good sources of information for where you might be able to find some providers that be willing to talk about potentially getting you certified into the program. Just thought this is always interesting. People ask and wonder about what a kind of typical patient looks like. So again, this is program wide across Iowa. Our average patient is about 57 years old, and it does tend to be just a bit more female, but pretty much right down the line, male and female. And we've actually treated patients as young as 2 and as old as 102. So the medicine really does have application to a variety of different conditions, age ranges, all sorts of situations. And so, we're well equipped to be able to handle just about any of those situations that may pop up. I did mention that our number one condition here in the state is pain. This is pretty common in medical programs across the country. It's often one of the conditions that is treated most, but you can see cancer and MS and seizures there as some of the other folks that we've treated a lot. So you're a patient, you are headed to the dispensary. What types might you find there? Worth pointing out that we do get this question some, and it can be a bit confusing given the name of our program. I'll always refer to it as our medical cannabis program, but the technical name of the program in Iowa is the medical cannabidiol, medical CBD program. However, our program does allow for full range of CBD and THC products. And like I noted, the purchase limit only applies to THC, but both of those molecules, as well as others from the plant, are eligible to be put into products and are indeed in our products. In Iowa, we are permitted to manufacture, and patients are permitted to buy oral forms, topical forms, nebulized suppositories, and vaporization. The state does not allow edibles, and it does not allow smoking. So you might be wondering, what's the difference between an edible and an oral form? Really, the big distinction is on sort of that those extra elements that you might find in an edible form. So you're not going to find chocolates. You're not going to find sort of flavored gummies or things like that you might have known about from like a recreational state, for instance. But you will find tablets, for instance, in our dispensary as an oral form. Smoking is, again, specifically prohibited under the statute. Not something that I probably see changing anytime soon in Iowa. But we, again, do have vaporization, which allows for an inhaled form that's done at a much lower temperature than smoking. So I'll talk about our product, because right now those are the ones that are on the market with that other manufacturer having shut down. We've really designed our products around ratios of cannabinoids. So CBD to THC. You'll always see our first number being CBD and our second number being THC. We start there on our calm line as our more CBD forward, moving down the line to our more THC forward. And this is not definitive by any means, but I've put a couple of the different conditions or the different symptoms of conditions that we'll treat with those different formulations. So you can see the CBD is often going to be good for reducing anxiety, reducing inflammation, reducing seizures. Those are some of its best characteristics, whereas THC is really going to be that pain reliever. And so you'll see that if you're dealing with spasticity or certain types of inflammation, that's really where you're going to see a lot of benefit from the heavier CBD formulations. MS, some of our mixed pains, and some of our other symptoms that maybe you're dealing with all sorts of different things. That's where a lot of our patients find success with that balanced mixture of CBD and THC. And then as we move down into the comfort formulation, which is our more THC forward, that's where you're really dealing with heavy bouts of pain. Maybe that's throughout your entire body, as opposed to just localized in one specific area. We also see the comfort, the THC forward products being really good for nighttime use, because it can help patients stay asleep. And as I'm sure, conditions or not, we all know that what it's like to have a rough night of sleep can really affect you for days on end. So a lot of our patients that do have those issues with sleep, we'll find that those THC forward formulations help in the evening. So what's it like as you walk into that dispensary? Starts just by noting some of our patient consultants there and what that interaction is like. When you walk in, you'll be speaking with one of our patient consultants. We hire folks that have backgrounds in nursing. We've got some that have dealt with substance abuse. We've got our farm tech that I mentioned. And it's really with that combination of people that we bring together a plan for you as you're considering what products to purchase, what doses are going to be right for you, and really try, based on our scientific backgrounds, whether that's from research studies that have been conducted around the US, clinical work that has been conducted outside of the US, and we really try to bring all of that together to make those right recommendations. With your first visit, you'd be filling out a patient intake form. It gives us some information about what is it that you're dealing with? What have you, sort of tried before as far as treatment regimens go? Where have you had success? Where have you not? Do you have any experience with, other cannabis forms at any point in your life? And what types of things should we be on the lookout for so that we make sure that we're dealing with any potential side effects? Really want to work through that in a sort of consultation process that first time to make sure that we're able to help recommend the right product and the right dose for each patient. That process can take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes up to an hour for some people. It just really depends on what your situation is, what you're facing, and what might be right for you. And worth noting, obviously, the situation that we're in right now is that although this is often in the past has been a face-to-face interaction, we're able to do this by phone. And in fact, that's what we're doing right now in our dispensaries. So still able to have that interaction and really work through that intake form for each patient to make sure that we, again, set you on the right path. So then what happens? Our patient consultants will make a recommendation on product. I should note that the program does allow a patient to make his or her ultimate choice on what products to buy. However, we really try to walk sort of step by step with you through that process so that you know what products might work and then what doses might work for you as well. Send everyone home with a dosing schedule. You can see an example of our Comfort, again, that THC forward dosing schedule here. We also have a custom one, and we're able to really dial that in based on our experience for your age and your sort of situation based on the condition or the symptoms you're trying to treat. And of course, make ourselves available, obviously, after the fact for, hey, this doesn't seem to be working. Do I need to increase my dose a little bit? What we find, which is a little different than opioids and a number of other pain relieving types of treatment, is that once people find their dose, they really do sort of stay at that dose for long periods of time. Obviously, with some other forms of treatment, you've got to sort of be increasing that over the course of time, and that's really not been the experience that our patients have had. We also make sure that you're clear on side effects. I'll say that we do have a small percentage, 3, 4, 5% of our patients that do experience some side effects, things like dry mouth, fatigue. We do get a little bit of dizziness or some of the brain fog that people have probably heard about associated with THC. Of course, in this program, that is indeed a side effect and something we're trying to deal with. And we can do that in a number of different ways. Obviously, we can adjust the dosing for you, but we can also add back in some more CBD that can really help balance some of those side effects that someone might be facing. So obviously, we want to alert you ahead of time. Each person does respond a little bit differently. Like with most treatments and medicines, there's certainly not a one-size-fits-all with this. And so that's really how we can end up with some patients finding success at very low doses and others needing those higher doses. But again, trying to work through that with each patient so that you feel armed with all the info that you might need. And just as a note, we do try to do all sorts of surveys and check-ins and follow-ups to really make sure that we're dialed into what's working for you, what isn't working for you, how can we get it adjusted so that it does. Is it a new product? Is it a new dose? Is it taking something up or down? And of course, offer patient journaling too. where someone can sort of journal along with what they've been taking, whether or not that's worked, and then bring that back in and really work with our consultants to hopefully find a really dosing product that'll work for you. So that gives you a little bit of idea. How have we done? We did run a survey there at the beginning of 2020, and we had just about 80% of our patients had reported an improvement in their quality of life. We've all had about 60% of our patients who've been able to reduce some of their medications, and of course, 62% of that reduction were opioids. And you see this really in research and literature across the country. You see this in Iowa and in other states, is that one of those things that people have been able to reduce by using medical cannabis is some of those opioids. And we're all aware of how harmful and problematic those can be for some people. So it is a nice option for a lot of patients. I'll say that it certainly won't work for every single situation. It's obviously not going to cure any of the conditions that are approved in this state. But what we hope and what we found really, again, across the country that medical cannabis can be is a tool in the tool chest to help you deal with some of those symptoms, deal with the things that a particular condition may bring on. With that, I'll stop and maybe take some questions. I do have our website and our social media accounts are all up there. Of course, we're always looking for more engagement with people who are curious about the program, have questions, had success, haven't had success, and want to always do everything we can to make it better. So with that, we can see what type of questions we may have.
Sure. If you have a question, you can use the question and answer at the bottom or the chat, and I will gladly relay that to Lucas. And I appreciate your information. It's astounding to me how many people are using the products. You mentioned 4,500 cardholders and 1,100 providers. Do you see how rapidly has that number increased over the time, and where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah, we've actually been one of the states that has grown the quickest with a number of providers. I think that's probably a testament to the medical community across the state has engaged with it, has tried to learn, has tried to become at least aware. Obviously, we haven't hit everyone, but I think that's been one of the big successes of the program. I am continually seeing in the numbers that the Department of Public Health produces that we have new doctors, new DOs and MDs. We have new nurse practitioners and PAs and podiatrists that are being added each month as far as new people who have certified. So I know a lot of patients do run into that issue and, kind of their first attempt, but with a little bit of work, we usually can find, at least an ear for someone to talk about it to see if it's right for that particular person. As far as patients go, we are on the smaller side for a program that's been around for 2 years. That being said, especially as we've sort of gotten at least a handle on our understanding of how the virus works, we've really seen those numbers tick back up. In the beginning of the pandemic, it had really fallen off. I think a lot of people were having trouble either not wanting or not being able to go have their card renewed or go visit their doctor in the first place. But we've seen that's leveled off and in fact has started increasing lately. So know that telehealth is something I probably should have pointed out. Telehealth is perfectly acceptable way for you to meet with your provider. It's allowed by the state of Iowa. And so if that's a relationship that you have or can take advantage of with your particular provider can certify you through that type of an interaction too. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person. And obviously in our day and age now, that is a good option for a lot of people.
Right. We did have a question pop up. Drug testing, when you're looking for a job, will it be positive?
Yeah, so each one of our products, even our CBD forward, does have at least trace elements of THC in it. We do that because we truly believe in the science behind those two molecules, their interaction together, even in those trace amounts for our CBD forward, we really have seen the evidence that that does help amplify the effects of that CBD, for instance. So that's why those are in there. However, it will cause a potential positive test. What we often recommend is making sure that you understand, and of course are happy to work with you if we need to, but understand that that is a risk, and whether or not that's something that might hinder your ability to get in. Unfortunately, for some of our folks that are holding commercial driver's license, for instance, that can be a hindrance. I hope that as we keep moving forward, we'll see some scenario where we can address that. But right here in Iowa today, some of those protections unfortunately just aren't in place. So it's a good question, and it's a good thing to point out that there is that risk that if you're consuming any of these products, you might show up positive on the test.
Do you find,
Lucas,
Lucas, oh, go ahead, Dr. Deming.
Thanks, Chris. Lucas, I'm interested in where you think we're going with research. Obviously, in the United States, research had been limited because of federal laws. And I know that those are being looked at, and the FDA is approving some protocols that would look at some clinical trials. So what do you know about the opportunity for clinical trials in the United States with CBD and THC? And then another question kind of related to this, as you mentioned, the CBD, the THC isn't going to cure the conditions that it's approved for, and patients are going to be taking other medications along with CBD and THC. Has there been much research on how to integrate CBD and THC into regimens that might be using conventional prescription nausea medicines or pain medicines?
Sure. Yeah, those are two great questions. So let's start with research. As a broad overview, there have been some approved by the FDA here in this country, some, I'll say cannabis derived or cannabis influenced. There's a THC synthetic drug that's been approved since the late 80s here in the United States. And in 2018, the FDA approved the first plant derived CBD drug, which is called Epidiolex, or some people pronounce it some other ways. But that really was for a couple of very rare but very serious seizure conditions. Now, around the world, again, that research has been much faster paced than here in the US. However, as you indicate, there does seem to be an eye towards some loosening and some allowance for more clinical type trials to be conducted. Many of the states that have medical programs have been doing various types of observational research, which certainly isn't clinical, but I suppose is something. Here in Iowa, we do actually have a new provision in our law that provides for that. And we'll see if the Department of Public Health, obviously they're tied up with some other things right now, but I imagine that hopefully in the next year or so, we're seeing an observational type study being conducted by them as well. There are some trials that have started. A doctor out in, I believe, Arizona is where she's based her study, is conducting one of the first clinical trials with some, I believe, PTSD patients. And the DEA is also reviewing a number of applications for cultivators to actually be able to grow cannabis specifically for those clinical trials. So not only does that indicate we've taken a step forward from that side, but that there's clearly interest in having some of these clinicals conducted. I'd love for that to be able to happen here in Iowa. I think, one of the things that a company like ours that is based in science, that tries to follow the science as close as we can, we've got to be on the front line sort of pushing for that. And I think what most people will find is that, we're, not surprisingly, we're going to be able to expand and grow programs like ours and others quicker with some of that research base. So, depending on the type of research, it certainly is more and more happening every day. I think today or yesterday, the UN has labeled cannabis as a less, I forget the exact word, but less dangerous, I think, drug. And so that's a big movement. That's one of the major moves we've seen from a world organization that might put some pressure here on the US to sort of get its act in order and at least realize that it's due time to conduct some more research. We're seeing that done in Canada. And so we're really, the US will fall behind if we don't sort of get in the game soon. To your other question, Dr. Deming, about sort of interactions and things, we do, based on a lot of that research and based on those FDA approved varieties, we can derive a lot of information from. We put all of that to use right here in our dispensaries. What we see the most, just a couple common things, warfarin is a drug that seems to interact with all sorts of things, and that can usually be a red flag. A lot of folks that may be suffering from or dealing with any sort of mental illness or sort of mental health conditions, we are awfully careful when it comes to monitoring those interactions. Some can be completely fine, but we do have evidence, from other clinicals that there can be some interactions there. I'd say the biggest thing that we know is that these molecules are usually processed through the liver. And this is especially true of CBD, is that we really want to be monitoring those folks who might be taking drugs that could cause liver concerns. And so when we see that situation, we'll often be asking that patient for more information. Some patients are certainly willing to have us speak with their providers and kind of have that sort of three-way conversation there. The nice part about these molecules and this medicine is that for the most part, we can really start at those very small, slow doses and understand what's going to happen before we have to ramp up for any reason and put anyone at more risk. And so, we've seen those couple interactions where we haven't recommended someone take a particular molecule or really make sure we're limiting that top line dose that you might be taking over a given period of time. But for the most part, with what we know, both from those clinical trials and really the research around the world, and then our own sort of, more anecdotal, but our knowledge over the last 2 years, is that we can usually do a pretty good job of managing those situations where we might have interactions.
Great, thanks.
Lucas, do you see patients that might be with you for a while and then sort of discontinue use because it worked for them and they got what they needed? Maybe it's anti-nausea situations for a cancer survivor, or do you see people sort of connect with you and then stay with your company?
It really does depend on the person and their condition. Of course, our patient consultants love seeing people over, and again, I think have really developed some close relationships with a lot of our patients. But when we see them depart for good because they've maybe been able to overcome whatever they're facing, of course, that's a great situation for us too. A lot of our patients that have some more of those conditions that you're sort of with for life, MS being one of the ones that we'll treat pretty often. And, people go in waves, just like it is with anything from, common cold to some of those more serious conditions, is that you can have those bad days, you can have good days, and we'll see some people on a very routine basis. They're in every 2 weeks, or they're in every week, or they're in every 2 months. And others will see for a short period of time and then won't see them for 6 months again. The advantage and disadvantage, I guess, is that we do really want to try to make sure we're locking in a dose that works for you, which can take, a couple of days or a couple of different attempts at finding that dose and what product works. But at the same time, if it's something that you only need kind of as needed or on your worst days, or when you're fresh off of some sort of treatment or something like that, then we can really dial in a plan that works for those situations too, which is ultimately, I think, a good thing about medical cannabis in general, and about the way hopefully we've designed some of our products here, is that If you need them when you need them, that's perfectly fine. And if you need them on that regular basis, we can make that work as well.
We have another
And
question. Third-party quality control. Are there reports available to the public? Do you have reports that for what terpenes your products include? Are your products full spectrum? What kind of soil nutrients do you use to grow in your growing process? Any pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, or other chemicals used to grow, harvest dry, or create your process? What are your product standard? How are your product standards determined?
Sure. I'm going to pop up. It looks like you were reading that one right here out of the chat. So I'll make sure I'll get everything here. Yeah. So third party quality control. So that, like I mentioned, is all done at the State Hygienic Lab. That is the lab that is required to do it under law. There aren't other right now in Iowa, probably because of our small size, there aren't other commercial labs. So it's all done up at that State Hygienic Lab. And there's a full, it's 20 some odd page document that actually dictates what we have to have tested and what the laboratory has to do. And there's obviously that hard line between what happens is that we send our product and actually our oil as well, that before we even formulate, those things get tested. And then once they're approved, we're either allowed to formulate with the oil or allowed to actually stock the shelves in any dispensary with those products. They're tested for pesticides, heavy metals, microbiological impurities, and then potency as well, so that you know you're getting what is actually what we say you're getting when you look at a label. The other aspect there is that it really is kind of on every single formulation has to go through it. Every different type of oil has to go through it. Every batch does get tested. And so, I feel quite confident, not only with our internal testing, but with that external testing, that certainly everything has been well examined before it gets on those shelves. We do have certificates of analysis that are produced by the laboratory. They do not quantify terpenes in those tests. However, we do quantify those in our laboratory at our facility. Now, with most of our products, our tinctures, our tablets, our cream, you won't see really any of those terpenes listed because most of them are stripped away through that purification process. However, our vape products, we do have some that are more purified and then some that are sort of less purified and have those terpenes available. And in those products, you will see the one that has those terpenes, the top 5 that are listed. And those are really the ones that are most predominant. The others are in trace form. So depending on your situation and depending on your preference, because of course, terpene, those compounds in the plant that give it taste and smell that you'd find in all sorts of botanicals, it does affect the experience a little bit. Not every patient wants that experience. So for some, we'll have that more distilled and purified form available that basically has no taste. And then those ones with the terpenes do have some taste. And so limonene, I know, is one. Pinene is another that shows up in a lot of our products that, again, are really in those vapes right now. Soil and nutrients. So we've got an in-house nutrient mix that we use. We use just cocoa otherwise for our soil. So a very, very clean process. We don't use any sort of chemical pesticide or fungicide or anything like that. Again, we have to have it all tested for that anyway. But we've designed our facility, and it's not shown in some of those photos I had, but designed our facility in a way that really, really does limit contaminants, whether that's by showering and scrubbing in before you enter a grow room, our limited access. For instance, I don't walk into any of our grow rooms. You got to have specific shoes on that don't leave our facility. We really do all we can to cut down on any sort of risk. One of the things we do use is beneficial insects. It's kind of a newer thing in in cultivation and in really farming operations in general. But that gives us a nice way to be able to use sort of, I guess you'd almost say, natural control if we would ever experience any sort of problem. So really think it's important that we don't use those types of chemicals, because obviously people in our program are dealing with some pretty nasty situations often, and the plants do tend to accumulate whatever's in the soil. So it's very important that you understand as a cultivator, whatever you're putting in that soil is going to end up in the plant. And so we're very, very precise about what we do there. And then how are our product standards determined? You know, it's a couple of different things. I mentioned that document that the Department of Public Health produces. Those really set the limits for, say, how much of a solvent could be in there, or how much of a pesticide could be in there. And of course, those are quite minuscule amounts. Those are more or less kind of the same throughout the industry across the country, which I think is a good thing. Obviously, we're sort of trying to always follow those best practices. But then we are able to determine too, sort of what we want from that potency level, what we want from those ratios. And again, what we base those on are those back to the same clinical trials, those observational research studies. The reason we picked that 20-to-1 is because we know that that's a good balance of CBD to THC, especially if we're trying to treat something like a seizure disorder. Whereas we know that 20 parts THC and 1 part CBD can be a very good dose of pain relieving THC, but still got a little bit of that CBD to help activate those molecules, but also block some of those side effects as well. So not to say that we've got everything 100% perfect, right? We're always trying to learn and stay up on research to figure out what those new product formulations that might work would be. And I think, you know, here in 21 and beyond, see us start to add to that mix as more and more research is done, and as we learn more, you know, from our patients as well. Hopefully that answers just about everything there.
Good question.
Lucas, I really appreciate your answers, and it really proves the point that you guys are so professional in what you're doing. And I hope that gives everyone confidence. This is really a science, and it's science-based, and it is you can be sure of the products that you're getting at the MedPharm dispensaries. So thank you for being so thorough. I had the opportunity to take a tour of the facility as well, and you know, it reminded me of many of my chemistry labs. And all of the science that is happening there. And it certainly gives me reassurance as a physician who certifies patients to be eligible to get these medical products, that they're really in good hands with MedPharm.
Yeah, so well, thank you for the kind words. And you're exactly right. I mean, we take the scientific aspect very seriously. We're trying to do things a little bit different than even in the medical side of this industry that maybe hasn't allowed science to guide it. So yeah, when you walk through our facility, you see laboratories, you see our PhD chemists and our other chemists in lab coats, and you know, full PPE and goggles and hairnets, and you know, our cultivators have all been formally trained, and then through university, and then have been trained in other grows. And so we really do try to apply science to every bit of our entire operation, because I think ultimately that results in the best outcome for a patient, and hopefully the best experience with us in general.
Well, Lucas, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We've chatted. I'm looking forward to the time when in Iowa we can actually conduct some clinical trials and look
Indeed.
at how CBD and THC can help improve quality of life and help advance research in this area. We're so fortunate to have you here in Iowa, and thanks for sharing your expertise and knowledge with everyone here tonight.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for having me, and thanks for joining and for the questions. And of course, like I said, if there's any other questions you have, we've got an email account. You can reach us through all those social media, through our website. So never hesitate to reach out. We're all here and hoping to do everything we can to answer questions and make it better.
Great. Thanks, Lucas.
Thanks,
Thank
Lucas.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm going to sign off and say goodnight to everybody. Thanks for attending.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.